This week on the Baseline Podcast, Josh and I spend a lot of time going over all the different things happening in the sports world. We focus on first the World Series. We talk about the ALCS and the NLCS, what happened, what we think was crazy about it, and also who's going to win the World Series. And then we jump on over to college football. We talk about the Penn State versus Ohio State game, and we talk about all the things that are going on in college football, plus what is happening to Michigan. All that and so much more coming up on the Baseline Podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Podcast. I'm Ben. That's Josh. And we are back. I know we had a hiatus last week, but hey, I hope you liked the update for the Ohio State game. I thought it went great. My prediction was way off, but we'll talk about that later in the show. But what we do, before we get into the sports world, Josh, I just want to simply ask, how was your weekend? Did you have a relaxing one? Anything exciting happen, or was it just pretty basic over there in Ohio?
Yeah, basic, I guess. I enjoyed some good company and a little bit of watching sports.
Nice weather.
So last week was actually cold. We actually had some 30s and 40s temperatures.
Ooh.
And this week it's back to 70s.
I love Ohio, don't you? It's just
don't you
so
miss
phenomenal. It's the
yeah,
same weather over here,
can't
man.
complain.
It's the exact same over here. So not like I'm missing much. But speaking of maybe weather, there's always great weather in the Middle East, right? It's usually hot, but it's usually nice weather. I don't know. I've never been there, but I'm just saying maybe. But one thing crazy that's happening in the Middle East, not like there's a lot of things going on in the Middle East. We can spend a whole topic talking about that. But what is interesting is that there is a brand new baseball league, Josh, and it's called Baseball United. It sounds fascinating. There's only 4 teams. It's like, I think one's in Pakistan, one's in India. I think the other 2 are in the UAE, I think. I can't be sure on that. But Barry Larkin as a GM of the Mumbai team. You have a few other, Miguel Tejada is a coach of one of the teams. There's a lot of MLB guys that have joined in on this to start this. Their headquarters, I believe, U.S. headquarters, I believe, is in Cincinnati, and obviously they're located in Dubai. What is your thoughts on this? We say baseball is a global game. We try to make it a global game. What is your thoughts on this as obviously as we're looking at baseball as a whole?
Yeah, I think just based on the demographics of the players that we get in the MLB, you can see there's a decent amount of Americans. You can see there's a decent amount of people from like Central America, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Cuba, and then there's a decent amount of people from Japan. But we don't get a lot of people from, say, Africa or Europe or many of the other Asian countries coming over. But after the World Baseball Classic, I think that's the biggest stage that baseball's maybe had in the whole international game. And maybe the extra viewership and excitement and TV ratings open the door for this opportunity, just because they're like, okay, we got to like continue to ride this momentum of increasing the sport globally into these other countries and see what happens with it. But sounds interesting, Ben.
Yeah, it's one of those things too, I think. And Josh, I think you said this when World Baseball Classic was going on. It's like the game, we've always known how great the game is, but when it becomes on a world stage, I think people are starting to realize that baseball is not just a boring game to watch. Like, it is exciting and it is fun to play. And I think we're starting to see that. I'm seeing it here in Hungary. There's obviously a baseball league. There's baseball leagues all over Europe. But to see the money going, it's just kind of funny. It's the UAE because that's also where all the soccer players are going. It's really funny how that works. But I think it is cool, though, that you're going to see a league that is, they're going to have, players that played the Major League Baseball, like Bartolo Colon's in this, Robinson Cano is signed. You have some guys that will know, but for the most part, it's going to be unknown guys that are maybe only known in that area. So I think it could be a great developmental thing. Will it be like the XFL where it will just fail after a year or so? I doubt it, because it's Saudi money or UAE money or Dubai money. So I don't think that's going to be the case. But I'm really excited, and hopefully we'll keep you up to date on what's going on. Maybe we can fly to Dubai. I'm kidding. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but it'll be fun. But speaking of baseball, Josh, I know we haven't touched a lot of baseball over the last few months, but let's talk World Series, because did we expect this matchup? I do not think so. Neither of us really thought about this really that much. But give me your thoughts on the ALCS and the NLCS and how bad the Phillies choked, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so baseball's been getting a lot of wins, like we mentioned with the World Baseball Classic, and viewership this year has been up. I don't know what the ALCS and NLCS viewership was like yet, but both series went to
it's hard to
Game
compete
7.
against football too. It's kind of hard when you have that going
Yeah,
on.
and there were some like Sunday night and Monday night games going on, and some college football happening at the time. So yeah, always tough to compete with that. But both series went to Game 7, and the teams that won obviously weren't any teams that we predicted before the playoffs had started. And even when you get to like the series, it's like, okay, well, there's a couple teams here that we can see clearly favored here. The Phillies, for a moment there, looked absolutely hot, hitting 6 or 7 homers a game, winning games by scores of like 12-2. And it's like, okay, who's going to stop these guys? And then the Astros, who've been the 7 straight ALCS.
It's by the way, that's crazy. By the
7
way,
straight.
That's just crazy.
Yeah. So they obviously got the experience. They had what I thought was the perfect pitching staff with Christian Javier, Justin Verlander, and Framber Valdez. They heated up right at the right time, got healthy. The Rangers, who led the division most of the season, finally lost it at the end of the season. So it's like, okay, the Astros are just going to keep riding this momentum. But then we get to, later in the series with like the Phillies and Diamondbacks, and Citizens Bank Park isn't providing the home field advantage we initially thought. Nick Castellanos goes like 0 for 20 after that game where he hit period where he hit 5 home runs in 3 days or something like that. And then you go over to the Astros and the Rangers, and right after that brawl between Abreu and Garcia, I think that ignited something with the Rangers, because you see how Garcia, the first game initially at Houston, he's 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts, then hits a grand slam to break the game open, seal the deal, and then ends up setting the record for most RBIs in a playoff series with 15. It's just, it's unpredictable, Ben. Baseball tends to be that way, and I know a lot of casuals aren't going to be excited about watching the Ravens and the Diamondbacks, but they've been the Diamondbacks got a fun young roster, and the Rangers got a couple guys that have emerged as superstars that have been fun to watch as well.
But Josh, isn't that what baseball is supposed to be? Like, this is what makes baseball so amazing. Like, you could think about it. The Diamondbacks were fighting with the Cincinnati Reds and the Miami Marlins for that last spot, right? Think about it. The Reds were this close to making the playoffs, and yet the team that beat them out eventually is now going to play the World Series. Like, that, as a baseball fan, is just so cool. Like, to think about how you can go from being barely making the playoffs to like, hey, we're one of the 2 best teams in baseball, is pretty cool. Like, there's not many other sports where you can where I feel like you see it as much, because baseball is such a long season. You see the ups and downs, and to see that is pretty cool. And one of the stats that I did want to talk about that I thought that you would be interested in is that the Diamondbacks were the lowest seed, right? Obviously, they're the lowest seed to make the World Series this year. They were down 0-2 to the Phillies and 3-2 to the Phillies. So think about that. They were down 0-2 and then 3-2, and yet still come to the World Series, which is pretty crazy. Another crazy number is, I think, like you said, the Phillies top 4 bats were, I think, 2 of 27 or something like that in the last 2 games. It was I was like, where did they go? Right? Disappeared. Once again, whoever beats the Brewers in the playoffs goes to the World Series. This is now, I think, the 9th team now that has beat the Brewers, and they've went to the World Series. So key to going to the World Series, beat the Brewers. That's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, credit the Diamondbacks bullpen late really last night, because you had a situation, I think, in the 7th or 8th inning where the Phillies were down 2. They had 2 on with 1 out, and Trey Turner and Bryce Harper are coming up. Yeah. Diamondbacks manager makes a change. I can't remember who he brought in, but ended up striking both guys out, I believe, and getting out of that jam. It's
And what I know we're talking a lot about the Rangers. We'll talk a lot about the Diamondbacks here in a second as we preview the World Series, but give me your thoughts on the Astros and Phillies. Which one was worse of a choke? Do you think it's the Astros kind of having it, you thought might have had it in the bag, or at least we're going to lean that way? Or was it the Phillies, where it's the first Game 7 they've ever played in the playoffs, but then on top of that, they had home field advantage. They were there at the Game 7 and Game 6. What to you is more disappointing kind of loss to end the series?
I'm leaning the Phillies, and it's just because of they just lost the momentum. And I mean, it's kind of been that way for the Phillies most of the season, where they go through stretches where they were just hot, and then other stretches where they're just cold and the guys are struggling, and they just ended up, really losing momentum just at the wrong time. Whereas when you look at the Rangers and the Astros, I feel like this was a little bit more back and forth. Even with game one, like that final score was 2-0. And then the Rangers win game two, 5-4. And then it's kind of funny how that worked, because that was, I believe, on Houston's home field, actually. And then they go to Texas, to Arlington, and then the Astros end up heating up and winning all 3 road games there. So you figure, okay, now we're coming back to Houston. They can definitely win one home game, right? And it just wasn't the case. That the Rangers heat up, and after like a lot of close games, they win by final scores of 9-2 and 11-4. Big credit to Adolis Garcia in those games too for a lot of those runs driven in. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say more of a, if you wanted to pick a team that more so choked, I'd say the Phillies. But the Rangers and the Astros was really much more back and forth. I felt like.
And I think it's cool too that you see all these young guys. I mean, you see Corbin Carroll, you see Garcia, you see a lot of these young guys that are kind of making a name for themselves even more. I mean, they made a name for themselves in the regular season, but even more now in the playoffs. But isn't it kind of cool too to think about how the Diamondbacks and Rangers were like terrible, like a season and a half ago, like we're not good, like at all.
We're hearing a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of stories that I've heard over and over again. I think both the Rangers and the Diamondbacks had 100 losses 2 seasons ago, and kind of taking different approaches. I think the Rangers have gone out and gotten some guys. They've gotten guys like Jordan Montgomery, who they've said over and over again basically wasn't good enough to make the Yankees postseason lineup, and so they let him go because of it. And now the Yankees aren't even in the playoffs, and Jordan Montgomery's the ace
Max Scherzer
of a World Series team. They go out and get Max Scherzer. Exactly. They go out and sign Corey Seager a couple years ago. Whereas the Diamondbacks are a much younger roster. You got, like we mentioned, Corbin Carroll going to win Rookie of the Year, 25 homers, 50 stolen bases. I believe first guy to do that in his rookie season. Gets 3 hits last night and steals 2 bases.
Pretty good pitching staff. Pretty good pitching staff.
Yeah, Zach Gallen leading the way there, and the bullpen has some guys that can definitely slam the door on you. So,
yeah,
love to see it.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I love this. But one thing about the Astros I want to mention is obviously Dusty Baker's come out and said, or supposedly, that this is his last year. What's your thoughts on that? I feel like it is time. I think we've seen a lot of Dusty over the years, and I think maybe as a Reds fan, obviously I'm very grateful for him helping lead the Reds to the playoffs. But what's your thoughts on that? I mean, I think he is like 70-something years old. So what's your thoughts?
70-something years old, and I'm sure you saw the stat that Dusty's never won a Game 7 and Bruce Bochy's never lost a Game 7.
Yep.
So not that like this is any kind of like detriment to his career, but I mean, he's gotten a couple World Series titles. He's been around, managed a lot of teams, won a lot of games. So maybe at this age or stage of his life, he just wants to relax now. He's gotten to do a lot of fun stuff in his MLB career. But
I think he was a manager for 27 years, a player for 19. So that means nearly 50 years of his life he's been around the Major League Baseball.
Yeah,
that is crazy.
Definitely one of the great ones that we've gotten to see.
That is true. So now, as we look at this series coming up, Josh, we have the Rangers, Diamondbacks. Let me get your prediction for the series and who your World Series MVP will be, if there is one, if you have one in mind. But give me your prediction of the series and who you think that World Series MVP will be.
I really feel like the Rangers have the highest ceiling here.
Okay.
Just seeing how they've played, the runs that they've been able to put up. I feel like the Diamondbacks maybe have the edge as far as like pitching goes and bullpen, which always ends up seeming to be one of the most important things when you get into a 7-game series like this. But yeah, that's a tough one, man. I'll just read you some of the final scores that we've seen, at least from the Diamondbacks games, because the offense hasn't been as electric as what Texas offense has. I mean, you got the Phillies win those first games 5-3 and 10-0. Then Diamondbacks win 2-1. They win 6-5. Phillies win 6-1. Then Diamondbacks win 5-1 and 4-2. So it's if your narrative is that the Phillies choked, then I don't know how much credit you're going to give the Diamondbacks pitching staff in this for that. But you can definitely see that the Diamondbacks aren't scoring a lot of runs. They don't have like that second gear where they got all these guys that can just, put 3 runs on the board with just one swing of the bat. But like I said too, I feel like that they definitely do have the edge on the bullpen.
Yeah,
And I feel like this is also a series that could also go to 7 games, Ben, and I hope it
I
does.
agree. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
But in a series where we got a lot more star power on one side and we have a much bigger age gap in this case between them, I'm going to give the
Be
edge to the
careful.
Rangers. I
Oh, be
know.
careful.
In a MLB postseason that has been anything but what you would expect it to be, I feel like I should say the Diamondbacks are going to win it all. But
So what? So
my
in
brain, my
seven? Are you
brain
saying
won't
in
let me do
seven?
it.
Are you saying in
I'm going to
seven?
say Rangers in 7.
Rangers 7. Who's your MVP for the World Series?
I think
If
it's
you pick a
going.
guy,
Yeah, if I can pick one guy, I feel like it's a guy that's dominated the playoffs in the past and is going to show up in big ways once again, and it's going to be Corey Seager.
I had a feeling that was coming. I had
I
a
know
feeling.
Adolis Garcia just had the impressive ALCS,
But
but Corey
usually it's
Seager's
never.
been.
But in the World Series, it's usually never the guy that's been dominating all the way up. It's usually a guy just in the World Series that kind of comes alive. That's usually how this award works. Usually,
Yeah, like maybe he has a pinch hit home run or is like that 7th or 8th guy that like just for whatever reason hits 400 in the series,
yeah.
something like that. But I feel like Corey Seager could be that guy, and he has been that guy. So
Well, well, Josh, I'm going to have to say that you have a great. You give the audience a great piece of advice, and you give them so much knowledge. But I'm going to have to say, screw your knowledge. And I'm going to go with the Arizona Diamondbacks I'm going to go in 6, just to throw a little wrench in the works. I'm going to say, okay, hear me out here. Hear me out.
all right.
You know how I talk myself out of these, so I'll probably talk myself out of this.
No, I
But
know how like you like to go against the grain, and then when you end up being right, you end up bragging about it on the show. And I feel like I should also go Diamondbacks based on what I told you about this series being any or the whole playoffs being anything but
see,
predictable.
so what this is what I'll say is I think you said something that was very important. I think you said bullpen, right?
Yes.
I think bullpen in the World Series, at least from the World Series that I grew up watching, I always reminded myself of the bullpen games. Really, we call them games because so many times it came down to who's getting the last 6 outs of a game, or the last 3 outs or 4 outs or whatever. So to me, I think the right now it's just like a slight edge to Diamondbacks with the bullpen, and then I go about the young core. Right, I saw it with the Reds all season long. When you have a young core that's fired up to win, and they want to win, and they have that desire, sometimes that youth gives you that little extra bump over the edge. And I think that's what happened in the Phillies series. I think generally they wanted it more. They're like, hey, we want to prove something. So at the end of the day, I think you combine all that with just kind of their momentum going into this series. I got to give it to the Diamondbacks. I feel like I picked against them. Didn't want them to make the playoffs. I picked against them most of the playoffs. I think it's finally time that I buckle in and pick them. I'm going to say the rookie Corbin Carroll comes up big in the World Series and has a great World Series run and comes out with the World Series MVP. I'm going to say Diamondbacks in 6.
Diamondbacks in 6. All right.
Ooh.
Yeah. One other thing that I think I can throw my way to make me a little bit more confident in Texas is that when you have like such an underdog on the other side. Like we saw this with the Rockies in 07, and then they ended up getting swept in 4 by the Red Sox, or the Cardinals, I think in 2004, also against the Red Sox, and they ended up getting swept. And we've seen the Phillies last year is kind of like that fun story, kind of the underdog getting in the World Series, and then they get handled. So maybe that can be the
Just
case too with
keep
Texas.
talking to
Just kind of
yourself.
like,
Keep talking to
yeah,
yourself.
that's what I'm going to keep telling myself. I mean, Texas has played some better teams up to this point in the American League, I feel like, to get here. So when they see Arizona, maybe they'll be like, oh, it's not so, this will be all right. But yeah, like I said, playoffs, anything but predictable. I wouldn't be shocked if Diamondbacks win it in 6 or 5 or 4. So
That is true. We love baseball, and that's why we like talking about baseball. And also, another thing that's starting that's maybe not as predictable is the NBA season, Josh. The NBA season's kicked off. A lot of names.
We are at that time of October. We got NHL, NBA, MLB,
at college football and college football. And the crazy part is, Josh, is that LeBron James is now officially the oldest player in the NBA. He's finally made it. After all the years he's played, he's finally the oldest guy, which is kind of crazy to think about. He's been playing for 20 years, and he's now the oldest guy. But let's just hear your thoughts on the Cavs season. I mean, what are you excited about? What are you excited about the NBA? Anything other than more drama, political filled ads, and everything else that's going to be happening? Anything you're excited about or excited about watching? And what is your prediction for the Cavs? Where do you think they finish?
Yeah, Cavs is going to be interesting. They ended up slipping out of the first round earlier than what we expected last year with that series with the Knicks, and largely we got the same team back, but Imoni Bates has looked pretty solid, at least
like beast,
in the summer league and in the preseason. So, and that was a pick that we liked because of all the upside of getting him in the second round, being as highly rated of a high school prospect as he was and stuff. So that is the one addition that I can think of that might have somewhat of an impact on the team this year. And maybe that's enough to boost us from like a 4 to a 3.
Max Struss as well.
Yeah. One other thing too that just looks really weird after seeing it on an ad for like one of the season openers was Damian Lillard in a Bucks jersey.
That is weird.
It just looked so like photoshopped and fake and incorrect and all the words. Yeah, but Damian Lillard filling in on the Bucks alongside Giannis and Chris Middleton is going to be quite a big three to keep up with. And like I sound like a broken record on this too, but will this be a year that the Sixers can finally get it all together too?
No, because James Harden's not even reporting to the team, so I have no idea what's going on in Philly. Man. Philly's not brotherly love; it's brotherly hate. Sorry, Philly people. No, I'm interested too. I'm interested in Victor Wembanyama. I mean, the dude. I don't know if you've seen highlights of him. What he's been doing with the Spurs. He's 7. Dude, he dribbles the ball like he's 6'4", and he's 7'4". Dude, it's utterly ridiculous what he does. He does a Euro step from the 3-point line, Josh. He does a Euro step from the 3-point line. Like, he's not human. Like, I legit, as I'm watching him, like, we talked about Kristaps Porzingis being the unicorn. No. Kristaps Porzingis wasn't bringing the ball up, dribbling through a dude's legs, doing a spin move dunk. Like, he wasn't doing that. All right.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how well he handles the ball.
And the fact that he's doing step back threes at 7'4". We all saw Bull play back in the old highlights back in the day. He wasn't doing that. He could barely move. Most dudes that tall can't do it. Obviously Bull's son is a little more athletic. But yeah, Wembanyama is going to be fun to watch. Also, I read an article that said since Popovich started with the Spurs, there's been 307 different coaches in the NBA, and the Spurs have had one. That is mind-boggling to me. But no, I'm excited. I'm excited to see obviously the Lakers looked real rough yesterday as we're recording this. Obviously the Cavs, I'm interested to see what they're going to do. Josh, before we move on, obviously we're not going to talk about a lot about the NBA right now because there's not much to talk about. But I do want to get Josh's prediction for the Cavs season. Where do you see them finishing for the season? You give yours and then I'll give mine.
Yeah, I think they can finish around that third seed mark, like I said, and I'll go ahead and give them 50.
Better do your math right.
2 wins.
And how many losses would that be, Josh?
82 minus 52 is 30.
I love how you went even numbers there. I'm gonna say 4th seed. I'm very worried about the Max Struss. Where is he going to play? The other thing is too is you're playing in a really a Donovan Mitchell kind of decision season. Does he decide to stay with the Cavs? Does he decide to go to New York? That's the other thing we got to think about. So yeah, it's very interesting season. I think they're going to finish 48-34. So I'm going to go 48-34. So I think they're just going to finish right below that 50 mark. I don't know how they're going to. Are they going to have that sophomore slump per se from last year's season to this year? That's the other thing we got to figure out in the long term. But
right. And if they end up in a position where they have to trade Donovan Mitchell, or if they will pay and extend him.
I mean, they want to extend him. I just think Donovan Mitchell, I think, is just kind of like he sees the eyes of New York, and I think it's very tempting for him. There's Cleveland, New York City. I'm just saying it's kind of hard to compare the two, but yeah, that is the NBA talk. We'll talk about college basketball once college basketball gets started. It will be starting here in the next few weeks, so we'll start talking about that as well. But Josh, football is obviously here. It's football season. It's the middle of football season for both the NFL and college football. Where do you want to start, Josh? Should we start in the NFL or do we start in the old college game?
Starting the college scene right now.
Let's do it.
I think that we're seeing we'll start off with that Ohio State Penn State game, since it was the top 10 matchup that
Lovely game.
everybody was looking for. Big noon kickoff, two of the top 3 defenses in the country going at it. Everybody knew that under was definitely going to hit, but I think most people were divided on who was going to come out on top.
Which I think was
one
crazy.
because, well, it's like, I don't know how many people have been following Penn State hardcore enough, but I felt like the narrative was that Penn State is on another level that they haven't been able to be at because of Drew Aller, and Ohio State is on a lower level than what they've been at because of the way that Kyle McCord has played. But then we find out that Drew Aller, who has not really attempted many deep balls this season, I think he had 12 passes over 20 yards, 5 of them against the UMass game, ends up basically not attempting many against Ohio State. The people were asking, okay, is it just because he hasn't needed to do that and he can, or they're just saving that, not trying to put it on film for Ohio State? And it ends up being like, yeah, they were all over Drew Aller, the Ohio State defense, even without Denzel Burke, making his life terrible. He completed less than half his passes. And then on the other end, I mean, Kyle McCord, nothing super impressive, but stays consistent. 20-12 final score. Yeah, I hated that, man.
That was awesome, dude. I love it.
All the Penn State like boosters and alums and rich people are selling their Maseratis like as of Monday. All of a sudden, the market's just flooded with them. And
Maserati Marv.
But speaking of Marv, I mean, that was he was a difference maker in the game last year and a difference maker in the game this time.
I love what I do love what Joe Klatt said. It was like, Penn State knew. He said this on his podcast. He's like, Penn State knew what they were going to do, and yet they couldn't figure it out. Like, they knew, where's 18? He lined him in the. By the way, give credit to Ohio State. All season, Marv never lined up in the slot. He never lined up outside of the outside, X or Z. What they do, they line up in the slot. They line him up in like a wing back type formation. Like, they said, we're going to get you the ball, and you're going to win this game for us. And I think that was probably one of the smartest decisions that Brian Hartline and what Ryan Day did, because I think it made it a lot more tough to kind of figure out what's going on, where's the ball going, what's going on, this or that. And we'll talk about the pros, what we thought Ohio State did well, what we thought Ohio State did do well. But I thought with Drew Aller, to give him credit a little bit, is Penn State did an awful job play calling. Like, you had 2 big runs by Nick Singleton, and I was like, oh boy, as a Buckeyes fan, I was like, oh, here we go. And yet you don't go back to it. And then you also put him in a really bad situation where he's having to throw against a very good pass rush that people still forget about. They have really elite dudes on the outside, and we're making it very well known against a very good tackle that JT just kind of ate a little bit for lunch. And again, you had a guy step up that needed to for Ohio State, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. No Travion Henderson, no Emeka Egbuka. You really couldn't tell. I mean, obviously the run game wasn't as impressive, but hey, you didn't have to when you have Maserati Marv. I'll be saying that so much. But yeah, anyways, that's what I see from it. Josh, why don't you give us your kind of pros you saw with Ohio State, and maybe some of your cons you still have worries about Ohio State as you're going into this next few games.
Yeah, I'm really believing the defense, Ben. You guys beat Notre Dame by scoring 17 points, and you beat Penn State by scoring 20 points. 37 total points right there in those 2 games. And last year, you guys were losing basically every game you played if you didn't score at least 37.
By 30.
Yeah. So the defense, it does look like they've taken that next step forward with Jim Knowles, that before the season started, we're like, are they going to get there? Like, there was a little bit of improvement from pre-Jim Knowles to first-year Jim Knowles. And then as the season went on, we were kind of like, okay, well, it hasn't improved as much as what we initially thought or what they really needed to be able to have a shot at winning any national championship. But this year, even with the offense taking a step back, I mean, Kyle McCord's been consistent, but he's definitely not like the next first round Heisman finalist quarterback this season that they've been used to having. They've been having that with Dwayne and with Justin Fields and with CJ Stroud, basically like 8 straight years or however long it's been. But it's not a big enough drop off that he's like keeping you
He's
guys
not
from winning
terrible, by the
games
way.
either.
He's still like first in most passing stats in the Big Ten. He's just
Yeah,
not
it's
out.
you'll read Kyle McCord box scores and be like, okay, this is like
This is
average at
okay.
best. And then you see his totals and compare him to some of the other quarterbacks in the Big Ten and around the league, and you're like, oh, well, it's actually not so bad. It's just not what Ohio State has had in
Exactly.
the past. And Alabama's probably going through some of that with Jalen Milroe right now after going from Jalen Hurts to Tua to Mac Jones to Bryce Young. So kind of just talked about both of those. I'm feeling really good about the defense. I still would like to see Kyle McCord be the reason that you go out and win the game, besides like the final drive against Notre Dame, because he still didn't have any touchdowns in that game.
Yeah.
But he still proved that he can come up and lead a 2-minute drill in that. So take that for what it's worth. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Ohio State right now. And I don't think there's any program in the country that has better wins than Notre Dame and Penn State right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'll say one pro and one thing they need to work on. First off, I want to say I've seen a lot of people still after this win putting Ohio State as like the 6th best team in the country, and I'm like, you're nuts. Look, I get their offense is not where it is, but they've just beat 2 good teams, top 10 teams, and scored, like you said, 37 points. What Ohio State team in the last 10 years has scored 37 points in 2 games against top 10 teams and won? Doesn't happen very often. Yeah, and then they're like saying that they're not going to beat Michigan. I'm like, tell me who Michigan's played, and we'll talk. But we'll get to that at another segment here about Michigan in a second. But no, I think Ohio State, one thing I need to see them work on is the run game. Like, Josh, I'll be honest with you. Like, as much as I love Marvin Harrison, as much as I love it's Kyle McCord, as much as I love, the defense, they got to get this run game figured out. And I think part of that is bringing back Travion. I think once he's healthy, it gives you that sort of confidence that he can make plays when things get broken down. Again, Chip Trayanum's done a great job. Nothing against him. Myan Williams, nothing against him. But you need to have your number one back. And then the second thing, I'm going to, go right off what you said. This defense, Josh, I'll be honest. I've been watching Ohio State football since I was a kid. This might be the best Ohio State defense I've seen since maybe like 02, 03. Like, this might be that good of a defense. Like, the way this team plays, they're fast, they run hard. Dude, Latham Ransom him and Proctor might be the 2 of the best safeties in college football right now. You have Eichenberg, who's still playing a little rough here and there, and the linebackers need to fix some things, but man, Denzel Burke being out, and Jordan Hancock, and I can't remember his name, but the freshman, he stepped up big as well. Man, they just looked phenomenal. And Jesse Mirko, 72-yard punt from your own end zone. That was a game changer. And I know we don't say that very often, but that was a game changer. Again, just a phenomenal job. Defensive line stood up when they needed to. Great job. But that's Ohio State. Now the question is, Josh, do we want to talk about some other games, or should we talk about the big elephant in the room that's been happening in college football right now?
I think we can talk about the elephant in the room once we get to our power rankings.
Let's do it.
Because
All right.
there are some games here that I wanted to mention.
Yes,
such as
talk about
it. USC.
They look
losing
terrible.
34-32 to Utah without Cam Rising.
Dude,
we also
what's
know
up with
now
you
that
two,
Cam
man?
Rising will not play the rest of the season.
I know. What about Utah, man? It's like the Josh's like blessing, man. Ever since you started picking them, they've just started to beat all these big teams.
I actually picked USC in this game, though.
That is true. You did, didn't you?
I didn't think that Caleb Williams would lay 2 straight eggs in a row, but turns out he did.
He's
Didn't
not
have a
winning the
touchdown
Heisman
in this game.
Hey, everyone.
Utah
he's
kicks
not winning
the field goal to win
this
it.
year. He's not going to win it.
I mean, I'm with you now. Like, after these last 2 games,
I told you
he can't win it. No, you were telling me that when he was leading the country in touchdowns and had 0 picks, and
told you.
It's like, okay, well, now that he's actually sucked 2 weeks in a row, yeah, I'm going to change my opinion on it now. But yeah, 256 yards, no touchdowns, no picks in this game. Looked average in this one.
Has he regressed, Josh? Do you think? Do you think he's took a step back?
I think some of it might just have to be with the fact that last year's schedule was a lot easier than what people remember. They did have They have to play Utah twice. They played a Notre Dame team that wasn't as good as this year's. Oregon State did win 10 games.
Did they play Oregon?
But they did not play Washington. They did not play Oregon last year. Utah was the best team they faced last year, and they lost to them twice. This year, they do play Washington and Oregon, and end the year with UCLA, the rivalry game. But I mean, they could finish this season 7-5 or 8-4, man. I mean, this is like Colorado level defense.
Does Caleb Williams come back, or do you think he's gone?
It's tough to say because I would like to hear some of these wild claims that people are saying he's making come from his mouth and not just from his camp, such
Yeah.
as like having a
What does
stake
your
in
camp
ownership.
mean? What does your camp mean nowadays?
Yeah, is that like your uncle and then that one like step cousin? I don't know, but they've said that he wants an ownership stake in whatever team that
Jeez.
drafts him. They've
Yeah,
said
right.
that if it's a team that sucks enough that has the number one pick, he might just come back. But I don't know, man. He might have a lot more to prove than what we initially thought once the season's all said and done, though.
Just be like Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Go to the team and try to play well. That's what you got to do, man. That's all you can ask for.
We both think highly of Oregon still and think they're a tough team.
Yes.
UCLA's been a gritty team, and the tough teams like you that play football like Utah, that play football like Notre Dame have been the biggest issue for him.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting to see how Caleb Williams' season plays out. If USC ends up even ranked at the end of the season, and I know everybody's going to be looking to see if Brent Venables is going to get into the playoffs with his new team before Lincoln Riley too.
Oh, that'd be great.
Which that very much could be the case. Oklahoma's number 6 right now. They got to play Kansas, and Texas also is going to be without Quinn Ewers the next couple
Kansas got
weeks.
a very good offense, by the way. A phenomenal
They do.
Offense.
Even when Jalen Daniels hasn't played, when they got Bean, the backup quarterback, coming in, they're still scoring points. But yeah, I only bring that up because Oklahoma, I mean, as tough as Kansas is going to be, I'm also looking at Texas, who is going to be without Quinn Ewers the next couple of weeks, and hopefully for their sake they don't lose one of those games. But Oklahoma.
I mean, think about Washington, man.
Right
Washington had a win with a what was it, interception, right? Like a 70-yard interception or something.
15-7 to Arizona State. Michael Penix, no touchdowns, 2 picks, making it really hard for me to rank my Heisman this week, Ben. Because I'm like, all right, Michael Penix last week, I'm like, he's clearly in the lead now, and then he does that, but then Caleb Williams does that, and I'm not sure Bo Nix really did enough to overtake both of them to be number one, and still has that loss to.
Don't you love college football?
Michael Penix in Washington, yeah. So it's like we're in the same position as it was last year, Ben, where we're 8 games into this season. We got 4 to go, and nobody has clearly overtaken the Heisman race, and no team has clearly taken the best team in the country race either.
That is true. I mean, the games have been great. Like, also, what is your thoughts on the Iowa situation last week? By the way, the fact that they had to win a game on a punt return just shows you like how bad their offense is. But
12-10 final score, right?
No, but what did you think about I don't know if you saw the play where they took a punt return back, but it got called back because of they said he waived. They reviewed it, said he waived for a fair catch, but really he was just saying like Peter, like doing this, not this. He was doing this to tell him to get away. I don't know if you saw it, but Pat McAfee kind of broke it down, and I thought it was very fascinating. That one, it should be reviewable. That's the first thing, and secondly, I'm very curious. Like, really, we want to end like you want to cost a game like that? It's a very interesting thing.
That's a tough one because if you got refs blowing a play dead, and then that's going to mean that the defense is going to.
But it wasn't blown dead though.
Not do anything.
But it wasn't blown dead. That's the thing.
When did they decide?
They whipped back and looked at it because I guess a ref saw something or he like laid down his hat or I don't even remember what it was, but they ended up.
So everybody played like it was a live play and
because he ran all the way back. Down. Yeah, because he ran all the way back. It would have been like a game-winning touchdown.
I did not see that. That's tough though.
Yeah,
but before that, I was looking at Iowa's schedule, and the toughest team that they were going to play the rest of the season was Rutgers.
Rutgers isn't bad.
But it was looking very likely that Iowa could win 10 or 11 games.
Yeah.
Now they can only win 10 max, obviously, but it's like, geez, that's got to be, looking at their final scores, the fakest 10-win team of all time. Thank goodness that the Big Ten is going to be doing away with divisions, or at least realigning, and that USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon are coming over, because these Big Ten West titles,
let's be honest,
coming over to the championship games suck.
Let's be honest. Rutgers is going to be probably go to the ACC at one point. Maryland will go back to the ACC, and Nebraska will probably leave. I just had this feeling that those 3 teams will be leaving at one point. I just don't think they'll see the benefit of being slaughtered every single year.
Yeah, unless they're making a lot more money in the Big Ten, losing a lot of games, I think that might be something that they consider.
Yeah. So as we look at this upcoming week, are there any games before we get to our power rankings and our Heisman watch list? Is there any games coming up here this week that you wanted to talk about before we get into our thoughts?
There's a couple top 25 matchups. Probably the most notable one is going to be Utah and Oregon,
That'd
just
be a good
because of the
one.
Pac-12 race.
Yeah.
Um, both of them, I believe, got a conference loss. So this second conference loss could really do them in. Uh, it's at Utah as well, but
Ooh,
as
that's
I
a tough
mentioned
place to play.
earlier, yeah. But as I mentioned earlier, obviously, Cam Rising is
Yeah.
not playing the rest of the season. So we know that Utah's always going to kind of have that limitation on offense. And Oregon right now, at least as a road, is a road favorite at 6.5 for this spread.
Yeah.
Oregon still to me is like one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the country. I'm going to go ahead and take them to win this, but I'm not going to expect it to be easy or
Yeah.
a shootout of any kind.
Um, I'm very scared to go against Utah because every time I've gone against Utah, they end up winning.
I'm going against
Um,
Utah again. I know. I'm saying that pretty
um,
confidently that Oregon's going to win. And
I'll take Oregon just for the fact they have Bo Nix. I think that would be the difference maker. So I'm going to take Oregon by like 5. I want to take them by like 6. So I mean like 21-14, so 7. I think like 21-14 type of game.
All right. Next up on the agenda, we got Duke Louisville.
Oh, it's just
And
such a gross one. Ugh.
Riley Leonard has been playing football again. Duke's 38-20 loss to Florida State last week, I believe, is the first time that Mike Elko has lost by double digits
That's
over
crazy.
there.
Wow.
So that's kind of impressive. At the same time, Louisville obviously is playing for
Louisville.
the spot in the ACC championship game still. They just got the one loss, and this would be a second conference loss for them. So they got something to play for here, and Duke is hoping that they can finish 10-2 and not be completely eliminated from this either. But right now, Louisville's the home team and a 4-point favorite.
Ooh, I think I'm gonna go with Duke on this one. I think they're gonna bounce back. I think I got them. I'm gonna go 28-24 Duke.
I really do like Duke as well. I think they've
Their
been
defense is good.
very underrated most of the season. They've been tough. They've been gritty. Florida State, I mean, they are a really good team, and they made it really difficult for Riley Leonard to do much of anything in that game too. But I'm going to go ahead and take them to win this one as well on the road. Excuse me. The one other game that might be interesting, if we're looking at big picture things here, is the
Ohio State Wisconsin game.
no, although that should be kind of fun to watch. Ohio State is a 14.5-point favorite on the road. I believe the weather forecast for Madison is
Cold.
not looking so great right now. Going to be a little rough, but as we've said, Ohio State can go and win those kind of tough games in those kind of environments.
They're tough now.
Yeah, they're a tough team. This is a tough team, Lou Holtz.
Tough team.
Yeah.
So what's your score? So what's your score of the Ohio State Wisconsin game? Like because of you see the conditions that could be happening. What do you think the final score will be and who wins? I think I know where you're going with this.
Plus, I'm gonna have a hard time picking Ohio State to score any like more than 30 points in a game right now. I know you've been throwing like high numbers around, and I've been like, I just don't see it, man. But I think they can get 28 in this one, and maybe the defense can like hold Wisconsin to just a couple scores in this one. I mean, Wisconsin's offense hasn't been all
They lost their quarterback for the year.
that impressive.
Mordecai's done for the year.
Then you throw that wrench in there too. So yeah, maybe this is a game that Ohio State can go out and win something like 28-10.
I'm gonna go Ohio State 35 just to keep the roll going here with me. I'm gonna go Ohio State 35. I'm gonna go Wisconsin 3.
All right. And I guess we'll see how much of a national stage this game gets, but it's Florida Georgia week. It's a big time rivalry, the world's largest cocktail party event. And I don't think any of us expected Florida to be 5-2 by this point in the season, if we're being honest.
Josh,
we've also seen Georgia.
If I'm being honest, I think we could see them easily going 5-7 for the rest of the year as well.
We'll get to that. But allow me to go ahead and hype up Florida only to not even pick them to win the game. Georgia has only been able to beat South Carolina by 10. They've only been able to beat Auburn by 7. They did have the game against Kentucky where they exploded and went 51-13, but no Brack Bowers for this game. And this is a neutral field.
That's true.
You go over to the Florida side, and Graham Mertz has been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the SEC right
He
now.
actually has better. He has better stats than most the top quarterbacks right now.
Right now, the couple common opponents that they do have: Florida beat Vanderbilt 38-14. I believe Georgia beat them 37-20, so pretty similar. But Georgia did beat Kentucky 51-13, as I just said, and Kentucky got Florida 33-14. And then last week, Florida got South Carolina 41-39. So it was a close one on the road there, but they end up, or actually that was 2 weeks ago. Excuse me. They had a bye this past week. So that's another thing to think about, is that Florida's coming off a bye. They're going to be more energized for this game, but Georgia's a 14.5-point favorite. And even still, without their best target in the game, Ben, it wouldn't surprise me if Georgia went and covered.
I'm going to go Georgia 52, Florida 21.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and give Georgia 38 and Florida 27.
See, we were close on the Florida side. I feel like I'm very high with the offense. I don't know why I'm always like higher.
You really are, and given everything I just said, it's going to be shocking. But to your point about Florida finishing 5-7, that means that they'd have to lose to Georgia this weekend. They'd have to lose to Arkansas. They'd have to lose to LSU, Missouri, and Florida State.
I think they could win one with more of those games. I think they can go 6-6 or 7-5.
That is 4 out of 5 games against ranked opponents.
What do you think? 6-6? They get Arkansas.
Yeah, the way this is the thing, Ben. I don't think they're beating Florida State. I think Missouri's balanced enough that they'll win that game as well. The LSU game is at Death Valley, but the way that LSU's defense is played, anything goes. So I'm not going to count that as a definite loss. And the way that Arkansas has been playing these past couple of weeks, they've sucked. They just fired their offensive coordinator. They're 2-6 right now. I think Florida can win that game, especially since it's at the Swamp. But based on what I just read off, I think 6-6 is the most reasonable. 7-5, 8-4 the ceiling.
Not bad.
And I will not be mad about that, given that I thought this was a 4-win season on paper preseason.
Look how happy you are when you aim low, man. Just that's what we need to teach everyone. Aim low, and maybe you'll go high. That's the way we.
And you won't be disappointed, right?
Yes. Speaking of disappointment, before we get into we'll give our power rankings here in a second. Shall we talk about the elephant in the room that has been walking around this room as we've been speaking about the old team up north? Shall we? Shall we dabble?
We shall.
We shall. Go ahead, Josh. Give a summary of what's happened, so that way people are not jumping in going, "What are they talking about?"
Yeah, we know a little bit more information now, so this we could maybe give a more definitive opinion on this too. But
yeah.
Michigan's been sending people to games to scout, to steal signs. 30 different games at 11 different locations in the Big Ten. Even this past weekend, they were supposed to be at the Ohio State-Penn State game. There were tickets purchased on both sides of the stadium, and for whatever reason, said individuals didn't show up.
Huh. Fascinating.
We've seen plays and pictures of coaches on the sidelines next to Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter holding laminated play sheets that have hand motions on them, which we can only assume are hand signals of the other teams that they've stolen from going to said games. We've also learned, or at least I've learned, that going to games to steal signs, especially with the use of technology, is illegal.
Yep.
That was something that I was like, is that actually illegal, or is just other teams aren't using their resources wisely? But turns out you can't do that. And then, if they did also use cameras, that's even more like of a slam dunk to me. But it also would explain why Michigan does so well in conference, and then when they have to play
trounced
out of conference, even against teams that aren't as good as them, it kind of turns out ugly, like because they don't get to scout them because they don't know who they're going to be facing in those games.
This
the playoffs, the bowl games.
Yeah. This poses the question: is Jim Harbaugh that great of a coach? Pose the question.
And then secondly is, who's going to get punished? Is it only going to be Jim Harbaugh? Are they going to vacate wins, which is one of the stupidest punishments I think come up with? Are they going to punish the kids by putting a bowl ban on? Are they going to punish the university by restricting recruiting and scholarships they can give out? Or are they only going to punish the men who are responsible for this? And will they do it fast enough that it could actually happen mid-season? Because even with like we've seen with the Mozzie Smith gun situation last year, they waited till the end of the season. Jalen Carter, with all his tickets in street racing, they waited till the end of the season to address that. And even with like recent recruiting violations like Arizona and Tennessee, they've waited till the end of the season to come out with their punishments. It'd be very unprecedented for the NCAA to finish an investigation fast enough, come out with a ruling, and basically end Michigan's season as we know it right now. But it also would kind of look dumb if they let it play out. Michigan maybe wins the national championship. Who knows? And then after it all, they're like, oh, yeah, you know what? They actually were stealing all these signs. And now that national championship, they don't get it anymore. And it's like, well, what was the point of that? And clearly we know Michigan's the national champion because we saw them hoist the trophy.
Yeah, I'll say this in two phases. One, as an offensive coach, right now as an offensive coordinator, I have signs, I have numbers, I have things that I shout out in a game. Like during a game, if you're the defensive coordinator on the other sideline, yes, feel free to listen to what I say, and if you can figure out what I'm saying and what it means, then steal it. I am all for that. That is gamemanship. Josh knows this.
Stealing signs in games has always been a part of the game.
It's a gamemanship. That's fine. I do have a problem that you are literally buying tickets on your own money. By the way, this was a volunteer up until I think 2 years ago, and now all of a sudden he's going to a $55,000 salary, which is very odd for someone that's such a low person in the team. But that's besides the point. But the fact that they're buying tickets and then going to games, and again, this is not me as an Ohio State fan. This is me as a college football fan. As an Ohio State fan, it really irks me because then I think about, are the last two wins legitimately beating Ohio State because they're better, or was it because of this? Now, I agree that I think they got owned the last couple of years, Ohio State has, but I'm just saying this as a general statement. And the other view I have it is this. On what you said, it is not fair to the Big Ten. It's not fair to college football if you are not getting down on this and putting the penalty you can as soon as possible. Listen, if Michigan cheated, and I've heard multiple Michigan people say this, Rich Eisen, a lot of people have said, if they have done something that is wrong, then you need to punish them accordingly. And I mean this, NCAA. Don't do this thing where you wait until freaking February and you punish them. And you've now, like, if you've heard the things that have come out, like every Big Ten team knows that they do this, but it's just all of a sudden now got traction. For me, this is something that is serious. And I think if Ohio State was in the same situation, I would probably say the same thing. Like I don't see why you can't hound down on this now. Take it to the point where, hey, you have to, okay, maybe they don't make the playoff. Maybe they don't make the Big Ten championship game. They're barred from that. Now, one thing as a Ohio State fan is I don't want them to cancel the Ohio State Michigan game. I don't want them to cancel the rest of their season because that, as a Ohio State fan, I wanted to see them play. But at the same time, like there needs to be some type of punishment. This to me can cue to the end of Jim Harbaugh in college football. Like I believe this is the beginning of the end of Jim Harbaugh. He's always looking to find a way out, right? Every year. I was
gonna say I don't even know if he'd be necessarily mad at that.
Yeah. That's the thing. Every year he's looking to find a way. So I'll be honest with you, Josh. When I first heard about this, it's like, okay, stealing signs, whatever. But as more information has slowly come out, it looks like a systematic problem. I hate to use that word because it's been used wrongly many times, but a systematic problem in Michigan football that seems like it hasn't just been like a year or a couple days. It's been pretty often, at least over the last couple of years. It's interesting to see what goes on with that. I want to hear your take and what do you think the punishment should be?
Well, I kind of already laid it out. I feel like punishing the kids is stupid. I feel like if the university, like if this wasn't a university issue and it was like only in the football program, I think punishing the university is stupid. I think banning or hurting future kids in this that had nothing to do with it and weren't even at the school is stupid. So I think you only can punish Harbaugh and Stallions and whoever else was in on it. Maybe that's the offensive and defensive coordinators as well.
Yeah.
But that's who I'd go after at least. That's kind of how I've always been, is like people that had nothing to do with it or that didn't like partake.
Yeah.
It's like,
no, I agree.
What are you punishing them for?
Yeah, I think Harbaugh should get a end of the year suspension. Like I think if you're going to do it now, I think you suspend Harbaugh for the rest of the year. I think you obviously suspend Stallions. I think you also suspend whoever else was involved. And I think you basically make a statement to Michigan and say, look, like these are the punishment that now you have to endure. And And I think that could maybe wake up some eyes. But enough of that. Let's go into our power rankings. Maybe this affects our power rankings. We'll have to see. But I'll briefly go over them. Since we didn't have a show last week, I'll briefly go over what we had. Last week, I had Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2, Oklahoma at 3, Ohio State at 4, and Washington at 5. Josh had Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2, Ohio State at 3, Washington at 4, and Oregon at 5. Josh, we'll start with you. Any changes to your power rankings? Go through it. Let's go with let's go through our top 5. Well, and then I'll go through mine.
Yeah, I actually was having a discussion with some friends about like how, like who the top 4 teams should be, and it really comes down to, I guess, how you'd rank. Like if you're ranking like an AP style based on merit, if you're looking for like the 4 best teams, kind of like a playoff power ranking, kind of would go. And the undefeated teams, Ben, that have the best wins this season are Florida State with Clemson, LSU, Ohio State with Penn State, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, I guess, with Texas, and Washington with Oregon. And if you're going by merit, those have to be the 4. And do I think those are the best 4? I'm not so sure yet. There's still some other teams out here that maybe have one loss that I think might be a little bit better had a couple things changed or had it been played at a different field. And there's some teams that are undefeated that, while they haven't proven that they really should be at the top, I think that they will once that time comes along. So there's a little bit of projection, I think, in all of these. But number 1, I'm still going to leave Georgia. Undefeated, 2-time national champ. Until they prove to me that they aren't the best team in the country, I'm probably going to keep them there. But number 2, I'm putting Ohio State there. They are one of those undefeated teams that I mentioned. They've beaten some of the top 10 teams in the country that I would have probably rounding out my top 10. I've seen them go at it on the road. I've seen them go at it on their home field against some of these teams. And I've seen those teams ball out against other teams that weren't Ohio State. So I know Ohio State had something to do with them not playing good that day. So Ohio State number 2. I am going to drop Michigan only to 3. They're one of those teams that, hasn't had that ranked win yet or that signature win yet. But after like playing slow at the start of the season, whether you want to attribute that to not having Jim Harbaugh or not having signs stolen for those G5 games that they played. And then when they get into competition with their conference opponents, they're like, oh, we know all the play sheets. I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with it, but still, they're playing a lot better. They're winning games by 40 points lately, doing exactly what they're supposed to do. So I'm going to keep Michigan at 3. Washington, I am going to, man, it's tough because they're still undefeated and they have that win over Oregon, but that game against Arizona State didn't make me super excited, but even still, I'm going to go ahead and leave them at 4. And Oregon, I still, like I said, think one of the best teams in the country. I think that I would definitely hear a case for Florida State or Oklahoma right here going in at 5, but I love Oregon at 5 still. I think that they're going to prove it as the season goes on.
So not much change, just a little flip-flop for you. Not much change.
Flip-flop of Ohio State and Michigan there.
For me, there's a little flip-flop, a little bit shifting around. For me, number 1 is Georgia. I'm with you. I'm old school. Hey, once you're the champ until you get beat, right? It's like any fighter, right? Until you get beat, you're the champ. So Georgia at 1. I'm going to agree with you. Now, I had Ohio State at 4. I was worried about them going in the Penn State game, but I had them jumping all the way up to 2. I just think that winning against Penn State was very showing of who they are now. At 3, I have Michigan. It's very hard for me to put an undefeated team that has looked dominant, even though I feel like they haven't played anybody. Put them at 3. Oklahoma will slide down to 4. Again, I think Oklahoma is one of the best 4 teams in the country. A lot of people disagree with me, but I just like what they're doing. I like that offense. The defense is a lot better than what it was. And then 5 for Washington is Washington for me. Florida State was close to creeping in, but to me, Washington, even though they had a rough game, I still think overall projection, they are the better of the 2 teams. So I'm going to put Washington at 5.
Right.
All right. Now it comes the big time. Now we'll go one-on-one this time. So we'll say 5 and then go all the way down. So I'll give you a brief rundown. Mine last week was Michael Penix Jr. This is Heisman watch, by the way. Michael Penix Jr. was number 1, Bo Nix 2, Caleb Williams 3, Dylan Gabriel 4, and 5 was Drake May. Josh had Michael Penix Jr. 1, Caleb Williams 2, Dylan Gabriel 3, Bo Nix 4, and Jaden Daniels 5. So let's start with number 5 for us. Josh, you start, and I will follow with number 5.
Yeah. Number 5. I do have quite a bit of shifting going on here. But Caleb Williams.
Oh, he stayed in
From
though.
1
He stayed
to
in though.
2 to 5. Yes. The totals still are there. I wish he would have his signature win, but once the totals are, I mean, depending on what happens this game against Cal
Yeah.
or when he has to play, I think it's Washington is the next big game that he has. He could very well fall out, but I think he's done it at least enough to be at least 5. So Caleb Williams at 5, but clinging on by a thread. There's some hungry guys under him like JJ
Yeah.
McCarthy, I'm sure, and some others that would love to get into there. But
What do you
number 5,
What do you think, Josh? Do you think I have Caleb Williams in here or not?
I don't think you do. If you had him at 3 already last week,
Well, Josh, be better than that. I do. I have him at 5. I have to agree with you. I actually had him out of my top 5, but I looked back today and I was like, his stats are really good. When you look at the numbers, he's actually had a pretty good season. Obviously the wins are not there, but I'm going to stick him at 5 again. Heisman Trophy winner. Got to give him some credit where credit is due. So that's number 5 for me. Who's number 4 for you?
number 4. And like I said, I don't think this is a guy that's going to be like making the playoffs, but his numbers speak for themselves. Jaden Daniels, man, leading the
He's a heck
country
of
in
a player,
touchdown
man.
passes right now. I think he is also second in the country in yards. He has probably the best offense in the country right now. I think LSU's scoring more than anybody right now, and it's in large
Yet they
part
have
to
no
him. So
defense.
yeah, no defense
Difference from
whatsoever.
Joe Burrow's team and his team is that Joe Burrow's team could play defense.
Yeah. So had Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow swapped spots, I don't know if they're going to have the same records at that point, but they're definitely not losing games because of him. So I'll put
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels at 4th.
All right. At 4 for me, there's a lot of shifting going on. At 4 for me is Maserati
Whoa,
Mar.
position player alert.
Position play alert for me. Marv has played. By the way, if you've looked at the stats, the last 3 games, he has the most receiving yards of any FBS wide receiver. He's had, I think, 3 straight games of a touchdown catch. He's had 3 straight games over 100 yards. I'll be honest, Josh, I've watched a lot of football, especially a lot of college football. I've never seen a receiver just own the game. Like we've said receivers have 200, 300 yards receiving, but like when it came down to it, they didn't give it to a running back. They didn't give the ball into a quarterback's hands. They said, we're going to give it to our best player, the best player probably in the country, or one of the best players in the country, and you're going to go win this game. And for me, I just look at his numbers. Like he doesn't have flash numbers. He only has 6 touchdown receptions. I think he's still like 13th in yards. I think he's like, in the top 10 in receptions. Like he's not tearing up with numbers. But again, I think it's opposite of last year. Last year he was tearing up with numbers, and we saw a guy that didn't have as many numbers win the Blitnikoff, and then obviously go and do things in the NFL and stuff. But for me, I think just overall the feeling that he gives your team, I think you have to put him in the Heisman race. And I think they're going to put I hate to say token position player, but I think he ended up might being that
They
guy.
always do, and I've been waiting to figure out who mine's going to
So
be.
I think it's going to be Marv. I think just what he does on the field, how hyped everyone is about him. He should win the Blitnikoff this year. He should have won it last year. He should win it this year. Marvin Harrison is the best player in college football, and Maserati Marv has arrived.
18.2 yards per catch, 766 yards and 6 touchdowns. It puts him basically in the top 10, top 15 for most of those. And like you said, he's been heating up lately, getting over 100 yards the last 3 games. He does have the one game against IU where he had only 2 catches, and the Notre Dame game he only had 3, but he's been balling out every other game outside of that. And some of those, I mean, had to do with Kyle McCord as much as it, you hate to say it, but can't hate it too much. Number 3 for me, I'm going to go ahead and throw Dillon Gabriel here. I think that's where I had him last time. Still leading Oklahoma to an undefeated season, still looking like they're going to be playing in a conference championship game this year. What a turnaround by the kid. Still has numbers that are in the top 10 as far as like yards and touchdowns go, I believe. Still playing a big part of their success over there. So big Dillon Gabriel fan right now, and going to go ahead and keep him at 3.
I'm going to Dillon Gabriel moved up in mine. He was 4 last week. He is now going to be number 3. Everything you just said for me, Dillon Gabriel is living out that of what we expected from him or what we hope to see from him, and he's doing that. So he's at number 3 for me. Who's at 2 for you?
Bo Nix, leading the country in completion percentage right now. I
Good
believe
quarterback.
he is also tied for seventh with Dylan Gabriel actually in touchdown passes with 19. Has over 2,000 yards, and as we've mentioned, some of that has to do with him not playing full games at the start of the season. But this Pac-12 schedule is really ramping up, Ben. We're going to be seeing Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, and all these other quarterbacks in this conference that we talked so highly of before the season started going at it. Man, there's going to be some losses had, and we're going to see who's been standing at the top. But Bo Nix is at 2 for me.
Yep, Bo Nix is going to stay at 2 for me. Again, I think he's been like obviously he's on my fantasy team, so got to hype him up. But no, he's doing a phenomenal job, and I think he's made Oregon a little bit better than even they were last year. So Bo Nix number 2 for me. And let's say
The
number
number
1.
one,
Let's say it 3, 2, 1.
1,
Michael Penix
Michael
Jr.
Penix Jr.
There's delay, but it's fine. Michael Penix Jr. Give me your thoughts on him. But even with a bad game, he's still I
Yeah,
think the
like I
best.
said, even with the bad game, it ended up being a win. Hopefully, that's the only bad game he has for his Heisman campaign, because I don't want to have a hard decision at the end of the season on how to rank these guys. But the big games that he has played in have been against some of the best teams that they've faced. So I'm going to go ahead and take that for what it's worth, and look at the fact that he's leading the country in passing yards right now, and he's still very close to the top in touchdowns. I think he's got like fourth or fifth as far as that goes right now. So I'm going to go ahead and keep him there for the whole body of work.
Yeah, I'm gonna same thing. I think he's a phenomenal player. He might have had a hiccup, but I think every Heisman winner has a hiccup every once in a while. So for me, he's number 1, and I don't think it's really that close. To be honest, right, at least right now. I mean, Bo Nix is getting there, but for me, anyways. So there's our Heisman list. We are going to finish up the show quickly here with some NFL talk. Josh, we have to talk about it.
We
This
do.
game, listen, I'm watching this game on some, I won't say where I was able to watch the game, but I was watching the game somewhere, and over here in Europe. And man, I'm telling you, man, that game gave me more heart attacks in one game than I have ever witnessed. Deshaun Watson, they need to just put him in a nursing home and never have him come back, because obviously he doesn't want to play. And again, I'm not trying to downplay injuries, but let's be honest, people, like he's got 230 million guaranteed. He doesn't really need to worry about playing, but that's a topic for another day. We could talk about it another time. But obviously the Browns came out and win 39-38. Let's be honest, getting rid of Cade York was the best thing the Browns ever did. They have literally the best kicker in the NFL right now, who probably will be one of maybe 3 Pro Bowlers the Browns will have. Myles Garrett has once again showed us that he is a phenomenal football player and is now co-owner or a minority owner in the Cavs. Fun fact of your day. So it is fascinating to watch this Browns team. Josh, give me your thoughts on Sunday's game.
Well, the first thing I'll say, since we didn't get to record last week, was I was ready to come in here and talk about the 49ers win. Like, what the heck happened there? With this defense, anything's possible. And then when we were going to preview the Colts, I was going to be like, but I still don't feel good about this game, because after we came off the high of beating the Bengals week 1, we laid an egg against Pittsburgh. And the Colts, even with a backup quarterback in Gardner Minshew, and
Minshew Magic.
not having to face Anthony Richardson, which even still mobile quarterbacks always give the Cleveland defense problems regardless of how good they are or not. So it was like, okay, everything's pointing to a Cleveland Browns win here, but somehow something's going to go wrong. And that first thing goes wrong with Deshaun Watson getting hurt. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that our defense, despite forcing 3 turnovers, which is something that never happens, we came in with like a -8 turnover differential into the game. We get 3 turnovers and still allow almost 40 points. Absolutely insane. Terrible tackling job on that Michael Pittman
Oh, it
touchdown,
was
by the way.
awful.
But yeah, as the game's going on late, Ben, it's like we're fighting for our life here with PJ
PJ
Walker here.
Walker.
We get to the goal line. We get lucky with some penalties,
What's your
which
thoughts on that
never
call? Hold on, hold on,
happens.
hold on. What's your thoughts on that call? On the first one, the one that was
Oh,
the fumble one. I believe that was a correct call. I believe that was a correct call because he did hold he held him Cooper on the hip. That's my thought. What's your thought on that?
yeah, that one I was indifferent on, but I'm talking more about the defensive pass
Oh, dude, that
interference
was that
on
was a
Donovan
terrible call.
Peoples-Jones
That was
that
a terrible
was
call.
uncatchable, and I was just like, you know what? They did screw that up, but the Cleveland Browns have been screwed up on so many penalties that I don't even care. It's finally nice to get one in our favor.
That is true.
And then I also thought like the way that Kevin called plays at the end of the
It was
game
so dumb,
was
dude.
kind of weird. Like I mean, they
Just run
were
it in.
the first two to Njoku were good play calls. Njoku, I mean, that's a good defensive play by the defensive back to swat out of his hands. The second one where it was a screen in Njoku and it hits him in the face, it's like, okay, Njoku, why is it hitting you in the face? And PJ, why are you slinging it like that? Like
Yeah.
put it more like in his chest where he can catch it. But
my thing is that you're on the 1 yard line. Just hand it off to your fullback, dude.
yeah, I don't know
Just
if that's
run it.
because we only had like one timeout and a minimum amount of time left to go, and we weren't going to be able to get 4 straight plays off. But they were like, screw it on 4th and 1 when it was like all
Oh
said
my
and done. It's like, if we
gosh.
don't get it now, we're never going to get it. And then we end up getting the
By
touchdown with
inch. By
Kareem
the way,
Hunt there. But
it reminded me of the Ohio State game versus Notre Dame. That's exactly what it reminded me of.
yeah, but survive and advance, man. Cleveland now is what, 4-2
4-2.
on the season.
Third place in the AFC North because the AFC North is freaking good.
It is good. It is good. So
What is your thoughts though on PJ Walker? This is my question. With the trade deadline coming up here, do you go out and get a backup quarterback because we don't know what's going on with Deshaun? Do you get Brissett? Do you go back and get Brissett? Or do you stay with PJ Walker and say, let's just hope the defense can keep us in games?
yeah, this is again where it would be nice if we had Josh Dobbs, man. But
I know.
I'm not on any let's go get Kirk Cousins train. I don't think we need to go and give up that much to get a guy like that that's only going to play for a little bit when Deshaun is clearly the franchise's long-term play. But a guy like Jacoby might not be a bad idea. I know PJ Walker's 2-0 as a starter, but if you've watched these games, you know he had nothing to do with the fact that they've won these games. Yeah.
Also, and let's just thank Myles Garrett. He jumped over a human being, by the way. He jumped over a human over the line to block that kick. That to me is still like, people don't realize that he's not a small man. He's 6'6", 290. Like, he's a freak.
That's why you do 65-inch box jumps and post them on Instagram.
Ridiculous. And also, you gotta get credit. Dustin is a phenomenal kicker. Let's just be honest. He is phenomenal.
We haven't really been used to having
since Phil Dawson. Like, this is the best kicker we've had since Phil Dawson.
For sure.
And it's awesome to see. Going into looking forward to the Seahawks. Obviously, we know PJ Walker's going to start. Give me your prediction as we finish the show. Give me your prediction of the Seahawks versus Browns game.
Yeah, do we know for sure that PJ's starting?
Yes, they just announced today.
Okay. The way that Kevin talked at the end of the game, it sounded like he made a business decision to not put Deshaun in. Like, yeah, he would have been healthy enough to go, but
they said he's making a decision.
It's my decision to sit him out.
They're making the decision based off rehabbing his shoulder, which is stupid.
Yeah,
but whatever.
And after going through like the Baker Mayfield situation, whereas he played as bad as he did with the non-throwing shoulder, I can imagine how much worse it would be to be dealing with that with your throwing shoulder. And I think everybody's like getting hung up on like the medically cleared stuff. So it's like our training staff must suck, and maybe medically cleared doesn't mean what we think it means.
But shoulders do suck, by the way, as a quarterback.
Yeah. If you're a quarterback, yeah, you want to have a healthy shoulder.
Yeah.
So PJ Walker starting. Yeah. I mean,
we also don't know about Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford was doubtful to play.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, with the Colts in that game, I mean, they had a top 10 offense, I think, going into that game, and it's been the defense that mostly was holding them back. And then when you look at the Seahawks, I mean, they're second in their division right now with a 4-2 record, so like the same position as us. They got wins over the Cardinals, which you would expect. They got wins over the Giants, which you'd expect. The Panthers, which you'd expect, and they got a win over Detroit, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But losses to the Rams, losses to the Bengals, so they're kind of in like that position as us, where they beat teams that they're supposed to. They maybe beat one that they weren't supposed to. They lost the one they should have and lost the one they shouldn't have. Coming into this one, yeah, Seattle's the home team, and they are a 3.5-point favorite in this one.
That's a tough place to play. Game. Tough place to play.
Yeah, the 12th man. Yeah, exactly. DK Metcalf, I think, is questionable this one too. He's on my fantasy team, so I have a little bit of an incentive for him to play in this game, unfortunately.
Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be healthy, though, so that's a threat in the slot.
Yeah, even still, I mean, even when you got all health, 3 of those guys, like JSN, Lockett, and Metcalf, that's hard to defend. So as good as ever I feel about it,
and they have Walker too, right? The running back, right?
Kenneth Walker, running back. Yep.
Yeah.
450 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I mean, it's definitely an offense that I mean, it isn't going to be easy to stop. But like I said earlier, I feel good about the way that our defense is. Like it single-handedly won the 49ers game, I feel like. So Go ahead and give me Cleveland Browns win in this one. I'll give us a 3-point win here, something around the 24-21 mark.
Yeah, I'm PJ Walker gives me nerves.
Yeah, I even feel weird about the
Jeez,
24.
24 is pushing.
There's a couple field goals there, man.
Jeez, I know. I'm gonna go. Jeez, this is weird. I'm gonna go 16-9 Browns. I'm going. Let me see. Let me count this. 1, 2, 3 field goals for each team. I'm gonna go 16-9. I think the Browns defense. I think the Browns defense will rebound from last week, and I think they're gonna dominate up front and everything like that. So that is the Browns score for me. Anyways, we talked about a lot of different things this week.
We did.
I hope you I hope you caught up with everything. Again, leave us things in the comments. Let us know what you want to talk about, us to talk about, new things to talk about. Let us know, because we don't always catch everything that we should talk about. So once again, thank you so much for watching. If you love watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That allows us to see that, hey, you're enjoying it. You're loving the content. You want to see more of it. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you share the link with friends and family. Let them know that they should listen to us every single week, as well. We're the two most beautiful men on the planet. I'm kidding. That's not true at all. But anyways, appreciate all of you. And until next time, we'll see ya.